Hey everyone, this is Rabbi Shmuel Pollan. I want to thank you for coming back to us for another edition of the Light Unto the Nations show. It really means a lot to me. We're going to jump right into the topic, but for now, I have to tell you about All In for God, a book that I wrote to resolve doubts about yourself, about the Bible, and about God. And you should really pick it up. Learn about it at allinforgod.com. That's allinforgod.com. We're going to get into a salacious issue of on the Light Unto the Nations show. I just want to say that you're about to hear some things that you've never considered before about sex and the hasidic perspective, the Kabbalistic perspective. Some of these things may contradict with what you've been taught by your teachers and your parents. So let me be clear that I'm not in this show saying that you need to do what we do when it comes to sex. In the letter of the law, we have a great sage named Maimonides who says you can do whatever you want in bed with two caveats. You have to be married, and you can only come while you're inside of the woman, not outside. But other than that, he says that anything goes. So if you want to do whatever you want, you have that to rely on. You just have those two caveats that need to be satisfied. However, the Rambam, the Maimonides, is not talking about what Jewish mysticism has to say. He's not talking about what the Kabbalah has to say about sex, which is a whole different deal. It's very different and very well thought out, and in my opinion, Kabbalistic sex is far superior to the way secular people approach sex, and I think it will solve a lot of the problems that we're having right now with sex. And we have a lot of problems, as we'll explain. So if you just take away something from this episode and implement it, even in one small respect, I think it will benefit you, and my time spent doing this show will have been worth it. So let's talk about the topic, which is sex in the Kabbalah. In Judaism, sex is not a dirty or evil word in any way. It's considered the holiest moments in life. While in other religions the holy ones can't have sex, our holy ones must have sex. The first commandment is to bear fruit and multiply, and the only way to bear fruit and multiply is by having sex. And the high priest in the holy temple times had to be married to go into the Holy of Holies. So it's the exact opposite of other religions. He actually has to have a wife. He actually has to be having sex on a regular basis. And the Kabbalah says that unity with her parallels the unity of God with his people and his world. So when you have sex and you connect with your wife, God connects and reveals himself more in this world. And that's basically everything the Kabbalah is trying to accomplish. It's trying to bring God down into this world and create more unity in the world. So sex is really huge. And most people don't know that the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil that we're all familiar with is actually a sex story. The fruit that they were so attracted to was not an apple, as you were taught, but rather it was a cluster of grapes. They apparently made wine out of it, got drunk, and had sex, and that was the knowledge that the snake wanted them to have. Knowledge means having sex in the Bible. He wanted them to be naughty, to have naughty sex, and do it in a totally secular way, devoid of any spirituality. God didn't want to keep sex from Adam and Eve. He just wanted them to wait until the Sabbath, because the Sabbath is a time of oneness with God. So there's clearly two different kinds of sex. There's the snake's way of having sex, the sex of two, and there's God's way of having sex, the Sabbath kind of sex, which is the sex of one, or the sex of oneness. So what is the sex of oneness? Because that's what we all really want, right? We want to come closer to our spouse. Notice in all the Kama Sutra's positions, there's only one position that's fully hugging and touching as much as possible, and it's disparagingly called the missionary position. It's not missionary, it's the position of oneness. In Kabbalah, everything is about more unity. And in Kabbalah, you reveal less, not more. The lights are out. Light reveals your separateness. And we want to totally wash out the differences between these two people. It could happen that within a Hasidic couple, one has never seen the other's naked body. And that's actually a good thing, because seeing one flaw could turn him off ever so slightly forever. When you have sex in the Kabbalah, there's no clothing separating you physically. This whole idea that you do it with a sheet in between you is a myth. There can be no clothing or anything separating you physically. There can be no strife emotionally. It's up to the man to assuage out any strife. You're supposed to be under the covers. She lies on her back, totally still, totally surrendered, no pressure on her, no pressure on him to do anything special or achieve anything. It's not the Olympics. It's about relieving pressure, the Sabbath, where there's no competitiveness, no comparisons, no better or worse. You just disappear into the other person. The couple French kisses during the act, so there is unity above as there is unity below. It's all about unity. And I highly recommend you try this kind of Kabbalistic sex at least once in a while. It will be good for your relationship and for your health. The snake's whole idea, on the other hand, is experimentation. If it looks good, try it. It's all about Cosmo's latest trick. Snake is the one who gives advice, and Cosmo gives advice. So the Cosmo is like the snake in our generation, and they want you to be as separate as possible, the sex of two. If you take separateness to its extreme, you're going to wind up cuffing and whipping each other, and you can't get more separate than that from each other or from God. The saddest thing is that millions of people read about this kind of experimentation and get turned on by it. I wonder how that makes abused women feel. It's pretty sick, because you're actually abusing your wife and she's consenting to it. Well, how is that different from an abusive husband that the wife consents to? You have basically Stockholm syndrome. It's an illness. It's normalizing abuse. It's really sad. But this is perfect for the snake. They're in an antagonistic position, totally separate, and having sex while being totally separate. It's a sign of desperation, because the snake always demands more and more. So it's like we've done all the kinds of sex we can do, and sex is all about the pleasure. So let's do something that's really as sick as possible, because it's all we have left to get excited about. What happens when the thrill of S&M is gone? Maybe swinging, maybe that wears off. You have nowhere to go but divorce or an affair leading to a divorce. But remember, we got kicked out of paradise for that kind of kink, for listening to the snake. And we all want to get back to paradise, don't we? Then we've got to have sex on the Sabbath. Not literally. And the way to get there is not having as much pleasure as possible. The sweetness isn't in the pleasure. The paradise is in the oneness you can have with your spouse. The oneness is pleasurable, but it's not all about the pleasure. It's about the connection with your spouse psychologically, emotionally, and physically. How much closer can we be until we become so close that you can't even tell where I start and you begin? Even though we're totally opposites. Because to be truly sexy, you need to be a real man and a real woman who are yet united. In a TED Talk, a woman talked about the clitoris, and it was a good talk. And she had an art piece which basically said, every pleasure a human can have, they should have. Judaism and Kabbalah doesn't agree with that. What about adultery? What about swinging? Should we have that? Being all about the pleasure is like eating only cookies for dinner. You're out of hand. But when it comes to food, everyone says have restraint. And yet when it comes to sex, there's absolutely no thought of restraint. We say, how dare you restrict me in this way? I'm not trying to restrict you. I'm trying to give you a healthy perspective. I'm trying to teach you what is a healthy diet, which nobody has taught you before. The main point of a meal is to get nutrition, and the main point of sex is to grow the relationship. The pleasure is the side effect. Man is right between the animal kingdom and God. Humans can go up to being God or can go down to being an animal. And since so many have gone down to being an animal, we need this Kabbalistic perspective more than ever. After all, 25% of married couples have an affair at some point. Pornhub's daily visits now exceed 100 million people per day. 40 to 50% of married couples will divorce. 15 to 20% of men will have sex with a prostitute. 44% of people said they currently use a sex toy or have done so in the past, and you might say, what's wrong with a sex toy? Well, it's a problem when it's bondage, whipping, and S&M. That is abuse, and those show that you have hit rock bottom and there is nowhere else to go for excitement in your sex life. Why isn't normal sex enough for us anymore? Why do we have to cheat? Why do we have to go to prostitutes? Why do we need toys? Because we've totally bought into the snake's advice and we didn't even realize that we did it. Separateness is sexy, he says, and it's all about the pleasure, he says. All of these listed above, what we just said, are all instances of separating the couple. These are the two big lies of the snake, that it's all about separateness and it's all about the pleasure. And the other problem with the sex of two, the problem with becoming an animal soul, is it's never enough. The animal soul is never satisfied. Things get a little more bland and a little worse each time you try it. So you need another porn video. Then you need a more sick porn video where the woman is being choked and she seems to like it. You need another prostitute, a hotter prostitute, another sex toy, maybe an orgy, a role play, bondage. This is all separateness. This is all the sex of two. So let's talk about the right way to have sex. So what's our answer to the problems with sex? Unity. If you're using sex to become closer to the ultimate unity, call it God or just call it unity, you come closer to your spouse and you become further from addiction, separateness, and adultery and boredom. Your pleasure is under your control. You're not controlled by it. Your relationship flourishes and you're fixing up Adam and Eve's sin and bringing the redemption closer. Unity brings calm. Unity brings peace. With unity, you never feel dirty or worry about your flaws. In the sex of unity, a child walks in on you and it's okay. Think that's old-fashioned? Well, how great is what you are doing? Whipping each other like animals or reading about it. And also think, is he pleasuring you or pleasuring himself with your body parts, treating you like meat? A woman is a princess, according to the Talmud and the Kabbalah. A princess is modest. She leaves much to the imagination. And the desire that we have for a modest princess is a desire that lasts and gets better with time. God will walk in on us one day, and some of us will be embarrassed, and some of us will be proud. Abraham said to Sarah, "You're beautiful. We have to hide you, or the Egyptians will kill me to get to you." Did he not know that his wife was beautiful before that moment? So he had to exclaim, "You're beautiful." The answer is no. He was so pure that he looked only at her soul. He didn't look at her meat. Then when he came to Egypt and he realized those are lowly characters, he had to look at her flesh and he had to worry about what would happen. According to the Kabbalah, we've already said that it's not about achieving anything. It's not a performance. The orgasm is a cherry on top, I suppose, a worthy achievement, but not the ice cream. So let's quote the verse here from the Bible. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. That's Genesis 2:24. It says you should become united to your wife, and you should get married first, and only then have sex. This again brings more oneness. The marriage bond brings the two people closer together in a way that they couldn't without it. Then it says we should become one flesh, where we don't know where one begins and the other one ends. Now let's talk about the thoughts you should be having when you have sex. The Kabbalah says what you think of at conception matters. So the animal instinct is to get wild. So don't be surprised if the kids come out wild, which is the next big problem because our sex is all screwed up, our kids are all screwed up, which is it's just a further problem. Let's go deeper into that. What if I told you you should think about God during sex? You'd say, F off and stay out of my personal business. But what if I said you should think about oneness when you're having sex? Think about how I can get even closer to my spouse than ever. That would be another story, I'm guessing. Well, oneness is what God is. He unifies everything. God is oneness, as it says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Clearly saying that God is oneness. Let's talk about the next generation. According to the Kabbalah, a child's life begins in the thoughts of the parents. Those thoughts should also be thinking about each other and their life's mission and what you want for your children. We see a baby is not a clean slate. It's born with a personality. It got that personality from the parents and their thoughts and feelings at the time of conception and during the pregnancy. So according to the Kabbalah, you can't have sex drunk or angry or thinking of someone other than your spouse. King David says, I was conceived in sin. The Talmud says Jesse, his father, was thinking about his other wife when he was having sex with his mother, not David's mother. He's saying it's bad to be born through the wrong thoughts, and yet he overcame it and became the great King David. So you can always overcome the thoughts that your parents had, but it's hard work. Having sex on the Sabbath naturally is going to have a good effect on the child. That's the day of oneness. Some people only have sex on Friday night, but that is frowned upon by my mentor and many other rabbis. One thing that's wrong with sex as it's currently had that's really weird is that we've lost touch with what sex is for. The natural thing these days is protected sex. The doctor doesn't ask, are you on birth control? He asks you what kind of birth control you're using. We've divorced sex from making a baby, when making a baby is the ultimate in unity. People love their children because they are a reflection of their unity. It's both of them in one body. It's not unsexy to us to think about wanting to have good children when you have sex. Now the question is, are Hasidic Jews really missing out on a lot of pleasure? Maybe not. Let's make a very practical point. Let's just think about this. If you do less weird stuff, there is always the possibility of doing that stuff. It's still on the table, and that's sexy, that you could do it. If you've already done all the weird stuff, you've burnt every bridge, and you can't get it back again once some position or tactic has burnt out. You probably can't ever get it back to work again in the same way. As B.B. King says, the thrill is gone. This is why so many are having affairs, because every time they have sex with their spouse, it's a little bit worse than the time before. So if I have sex with a new person, we're fresh. We start all over. It's new. It's a clean slate. The pleasure scale is way back up again. And then during the affair, it starts to go down again. Eventually it goes down until your first husband's levels, and then you need another affair. But we shouldn't be looking for new and exciting when it comes to sex. We shouldn't have a pleasure scale. We should be looking for more unity to psychologically get to know each other even more. Sex is called knowledge in the Bible. Adam knew Eve. You're getting to know your spouse more, and you're becoming closer every day that you reveal yourself more and more to each other. Then you have sex and you learn more about each other. And then you have sex again, but this time you're even more psychologically connected. So it gets better every time, not worse. There can always be more unity, not so when you're looking for the next thrill. Need to introduce spirituality. You need to introduce the soul. You need to become one with her spirit. Then there's like a magnet between you that lasts your whole marriage. I'm going to tell you about another strategy that keeps sex fresh for the lifetime of the marriage. What about not having sex before marriage? How can I do that? We haven't, quote, tried it out. If you're worried that it won't work, don't worry. The parts will fit. Hasidic Jews have been doing this for 50 generations and never had a problem of it not working. It will work. Now I'll tell you a quote that you can't forget. Geoffrey Chaucer says that familiarity breeds contempt, and that's so true. A group of teens told my mentor, we're going on a camping trip and we're going with these such and such girls. And he said, whoa, you're going with girls on a camping trip? That's a problem. He said, no, these girls are like sisters to us. They could even sleep in our sleeping bags and nothing would happen. So he said, if they sleep in your sleeping bags and nothing would happen, you don't need a rabbi, you need a shrink. Familiarity breeds contempt. They're too familiar, and now, as B.B. King says, the thrill is gone. The Hasidic Jews take the opposite approach. Instead, we totally limit the interaction between the boys and the girls. They're separated at first grade. And then when they finally meet and get married, it's like a powder keg. You can cut the tension with a knife. I bet if we measured it, the best sex in the world is had by Hasidic men and women on their wedding night. Because they've never been with a woman, and to make it even more intense, you can't see each other for a week before the wedding. So the relationship just explodes, and we keep the thrill going. Now, Jews, upon their period, separate for 2 weeks out of the month. And again, when they come back together after the woman goes into a beautiful ritual bath where she cuts her nails and cleans everything in between her nails and beautifies her hair, cleans her hair, it's like fireworks all over the place when they come back together. She just comes back looking so beautiful and you haven't been able to touch her for 2 weeks. You can imagine what kind of sparks that creates. That's to say, I don't hide anything from my husband. He sees me when I'm going to the bathroom. He sees me with unshaven legs. That's great. But that's not a marriage that's going to last very long. So take the opposite approach. Protect yourself a little, hide a little, be modest a little. Distance makes the heart grow fonder, while closeness brings contempt. During the Nida period, the 2 weeks off, you can't even hint at intimacy. They can't sleep in the same bed. You can't hug. You can't even shake hands. They don't even speak of intimate things. Then she goes to the beautiful ritual bath, and there's the fireworks. The Bible is so careful about intimacy that it doesn't want anything to disrupt it. So you have to be perfect about not being sexual for 2 full weeks. Gentiles are not commanded to keep that 2 week on, 2 week off rule. But you can set up some time to be separate in some ways and not touch each other and not talk about sex, connect at a soul level, connect at an emotional level, and then go back to being intimate again. You can have some kind of rhythm. I suppose if you want to do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, you could. It would not be a sin. It's just not a thing that Gentiles are commanded to do. But the point is, distance makes the heart grow fonder. During the time off, you build just emotional and psychological bonds, and then you express that through having sex. Let's talk about marriage. Marriage is under attack, and it's dying. People have a feeling like there's no point to getting married. They can have sex all day long and switch partners every week if they want to. We need to fight that tide. Again, that's separateness. It's never coming really close to one person. We need to stick up for oneness and say, no, I'm getting married to this man or woman because I believe in unity, because I believe in love and I believe we should be as united as possible. And marriage makes any man or woman closer and more united. So I'm going to stand under that canopy, under one cloth, and become fused, and yet divided by an ocean, but fused as one. That's the contradiction in marriage and in sex in the Kabbalah. You're completely opposite, and yet you're completely one. Now, what about hasidic dating? Matchmakers do the lion's share of the dating work for you. You go to a matchmaker and you talk about what you're looking for. What are your goals? And she gives you a few names that she thinks would line up with you. There's no pickup. It's just a setup, a blind date. And you don't go to crazy loud places like a bar or a club. You go to a really quiet place like a hotel lobby or a Starbucks, where you really talk and get to know each other. And if you don't like them, you don't have to tell them. You just tell the matchmaker, and the matchmaker takes care of it quietly and elegantly. This article I'm about to tell you about is a little bit old, but it proves the point. Here's a quote from Haaretz newspaper. In the Orthodox settlement of Modin Elite, for example, the rate of divorce in 2002 was one couple out of 1,000 between the ages of 15 and 49. 1 out of 1,000. It's climbing because people are secularizing and biting into the snake meat. But in 2002, it was 1 out of 1,000. That's pretty darn good. I wish you all marriages. Marriage is founded on unity, not on pleasure. Marriage is where you treat each other like a prince and a princess, and that it should make you into better, more godly, united people. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, hit the bell, and comment on what you think of what I had to say about sex. God bless.